For this lesson, we're going to be determining if a graph is a function. And then after that, whether it is or not, we're going to be finding the domain and range for the graph that's given. So you'll see that I already wrote the word function. Domain stands for X values. Range stands for your Y values. So for each graph, we're just going to say a yes or no here. And then we're going to have to list values when we're talking about the domain and range for the graph that we see. So let's look at number 1. First of all, I'm hoping that you can see it. There's a line here, and this is filled in. It is definitely a solid circle, and this one is an open circle. Okay, well, looking at that, first of all, in order to know whether it's a function or not, we do the vertical line test. And the vertical line test is just done by placing a pencil near it, seeing if it hits more than one point on the graph. And that definitely hits tons of points. So the answer is that no, this is not a function. So now we're going to look and see what are the domain, what are the X values? Well, notice it just goes through a -2. So X actually is just equal to one value, -2. But our Y values are part of this whole line. So I'm looking, this is me thinking about it. I'm looking over here and I see that I have a 4 there. And then I'm looking down here and I see that I have a -6. So I know that Y is going to be between those values, because if you keep looking back at the Y-axis, you see that it's between those two numbers. Well, this is a closed circle, so we are going to have our Y in the center. This is a compound inequality. And I'm going to do, I always need to start with your smaller numbers first, and this is an open circle. So I know that Y is going to be greater than a -6. It's all the way up here. And notice I did not put a greater than or equal, or the less than or equal to symbol there, because I have a open circle. So now looking at how large it gets, we have Y is equal to a 4 or less than a 4 there, and notice it is a closed circle. So when you're graphing these, and it's an important thing to know, you just like at the number line, you would go ahead and you'd have your smaller number here, you have your larger number on this side, and the Y is just sandwiched in between. So Y are all of the values that you would find on that line. Okay, well, let's look at the next one. The next one looks like, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run my pencil, down onto each one of this graph, one at a time, and I can check the whole graph. And for number 2, I can see that, yes, it definitely is a function. So now I want to make sure that you can see, so I'm going to highlight it in my red, that there's actually arrows here on both sides of this graph. And so my domain values, notice they go on forever on the positive side, and on the negative side of the x-axis, they go on forever. So when you see something like that, we get to say all real numbers. All real numbers for the x, because again, we're looking at the x-axis and we're looking up, and I see 2 arrows. Okay, so for the y-axis, as I'm looking at this, I see that it does come down, and I'm going to mark this, it does come down to this -2, and then notice on each side of the graph, it keeps getting larger values. Same thing on this side, larger values. When we are looking at our y-axis now, we are range, when we're trying to find the range, we're looking at our y-axis. So when I'm looking at that, I know that y has to be greater than or equal to, because it does hit that -2. So y can't be any of the negative numbers down here because this is the way the graph does go. All right, so let's look at number 3. For number 3, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight the fact that here's an endpoint, a solid circle, and notice this one actually has an arrow there. And if I go ahead and I do my pencil test, I want to see my vertical line test. Does it hit this graph more than once each time I move it? And the answer is no, it does not. Therefore, yes, this is a function. So when we're looking at this one, we can see that we're looking for the domain, the x values. Well, notice it's here at 6, and then it goes on the x-axis, and it's all smaller numbers. And then this arrow means it's going on forever. So we know that x is going to have to be, and that's a solid circle, less than or equal to 6. It cannot, and when I say x, I'm talking about my domain, and that's where x is less than or equal to 6. And that's because it does have an endpoint here. All right, so now we're going to look at our range. And again, our range is our y-axis. And I'm going to go ahead and I am going to circle this. And it looks like it's a little bit off of that -4, but we're going to call it -4. So I'm looking at my y-axis, and notice below -4, there's no part of this graph, but above it, there is, and on this, because that has the arrow, it's going to definitely be bigger numbers than the -4. So when we're looking for the range, the y for number 3, we get y is greater than or equal to a -4. Okay, so hopefully this is becoming easier. When I'm looking at this one, notice it's a circle. And I am going to put my, pencil here. Oh, and when I do that, I see that even if I draw a line, you can draw a vertical line. I see one there. Oh, I'm looking here. And notice it does hit in 2 places. So our answer for, is it a function? No, it is not a function. Now let's look at our domain values. And since I went ahead and I used my red to test whether it was a function or not, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a purple marker in order to mark our values for our x. So I'm looking at the x-axis, and I see that this circle goes ahead and it does hit the x-axis there. But notice, see this point right here, the fact that it's actually an oval, it would 4, and this would be possibly a -2. So I know that if I'm looking at this shape, I'm going to look straight up, and I know that 4 is actually one of the solutions. And then I'm looking here, and I'm going on the x-axis. Okay, I'm still in this oval. But notice here, I am now going to go down. So I know that this oval is between a -4 and a 4. So when we do that for our x, yes, remember the x goes in the middle. And because you see that it actually includes that point, x is going to be less than or equal to, and when we're looking at the smaller one, actually it's going to be x is greater than or equal to a -4. I'm just putting my bookmarks here, my -4, and I'm putting my +4. So I know that any x values in between here would be on my graph. All right, well, let's look at the range, the y values. And when we're looking at the y values now, we are looking at the y-axis. And where is this graph? So I see it hits the y-axis here, and it also hits the y-axis up here. So when I'm looking for what values are part of my y, again, I'm going to write my y in the middle of a compound inequality. And then I'm just going to put I call it my bookends. I see that it can be, that is a -5. And on this side, it is a 1. So we can see that y are any values between 1 and -5. If this video was helpful to you today, please add a like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more Math with Marcia. See you again soon.